The next one I had was The Comedian and Rorschach. I want to say that this one, overall, like this one, you know, of the two stories together combined were really good. They were solid. And something that it was written by Brian Azzarello, and something that Brian does incredibly well. He focuses on one theme and laces these things, drops nuggets of things in that really kind of lead you to emotional points within the stories. With The Comedian, he very much, you know, he has this sarcastic way of saying something that means two things. You know, it's an answer to one thing, but it means something else as well, and it alludes to things that either you don't know about yet. Right. And that was the interesting thing for me. He took two different approaches whenever he wrote these. It seems like The Comedian is very much like he'll have flashbacks, and he'll have these moments of where it's not linear storytelling necessarily, where, you know, he'll allude to something whenever he's talking to a character, and then, you know, a few frames later you go, oh, that's why he said it that way, and it's hilarious, you know, and it's awesome. And so overall, I would say that this one was probably my favorite of the two large books. And so Comedian has a lot of, you mentioned that they have like the world at large. That one, to me, it fits into the history incredibly well. He ties The Comedian, because of like Vietnam and things like that. He ties him
to real world
events, and he ties him not only to just real world events. He ties them to events in a fashion where he's in the same room at like critical decision making points, or having a conversation directly after critical decision making points. And so he's involved in these things, and it's a story of a comedian's kind of descent from being a legit, hero, where the public views him as a hero, a superhero, somebody calls him at one point, and his descent from that point into kind of being loathed by the general public as a representation of the man and political overreach and brutality, that sort of thing, police brutality.
And it was kind of like those themes were in regular Watchmen as well.
Definitely. You just didn't see like why, and you didn't see, the personal level. Like you didn't see a whole lot of Vietnam. You see a little bit of that in here, and you didn't see the political side of things. So that definitely is addressed. On the Rorschach side of things, this is the book. This is the storyline that I would say is probably one of my favorites, just because it could exist without Watchmen. It doesn't allude to almost anything within Watchmen. Right. It's very linear. Right. And it's a detective story. It's him trying to decipher a case, very much similar to the way Night Owl was, but even more so. Like even more of this very very much a. He's very methodical, and he kind of goes at this thing, where he's interrogating people, bursting indoors. He's Rorschach being Rorschach, and Rorschach being Rorschach at his best. That's cool. Where, he's not as beaten down as he is at kind of the end of Watchmen. Right. And
honestly, in Watchmen, he's really the only one who keeps his senses about him.
He is.
And like, I really liked him as a character. He's the rock throughout the story. He doesn't, you can depend on.
Right, and he doesn't really change a ton. In this story, he kind of, he has these there are a couple of things. You see him on his personal level without his mask. Yeah. And you see kind of how he was living and that aspect of it, which you never saw before. You always wonder just, hey, is this guy homeless or what's the deal with this guy really? So this is definitely a standalone story, similar to the way you were talking about the Silk Spectre story. I'm sure you could put it in a definite place in the timeline because he's all alone and that sort of thing, not with Night Owl. I'm sure you could put it in place in the timeline, but it feels like a standalone thing and could almost represent a whole offshoot for the character of maybe some more stories and some more cases and things like that. Rorschach definitely has a big role in the Night Owl book because Rorschach represents a really important part of that character. It represents like a conflict in the character, a gray area. But this book is definitely where Rorschach is the main guy. Like there's no Night Owl in it. There's no other superhero in it at all. And so this is definitely a all Rorschach story.